Shalom everyone. In this video we continue with our discussion on Kabbalah, on what is a soul, which we answer the question, what is a soul? In this second part, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be using the resources that we have, the information from ancient teachings of Kabbalah that let us know where we get this idea of a soul, and a soul that has 5 different levels. Just to recap what we learned in the first video, and if you haven't seen the first video, the link to that video is in the description below. We have 3 levels that we are basically able to interact while we're living in our physical body. The one that we interact the most is the nefesh. The nefesh is that part of the soul that is considered to be the lowest one. It's the soul, the animal soul, that source of life, let's say, of the physical body. And this nefesh, what actually does is to help the body stay alive and basically concerning itself with the physical desires and instinct. It has to do with pleasure and survival. So it's basically like all the animals that we see. Their whole purpose is to have pleasure and also to multiply and preserve the species. Now, the level above the nefesh is a level called ruach, and this is a level when we talk about the naran, which is an NRN for naran, means nefesh, ruach, neshama. The ruach is the middle level. It's between the nefesh and another level that is called neshama, and in some traditions it's translated as a spirit. This part is the one that is going to help us distinguish between good and evil. What is good, what is bad. It's kind of like a moral compass in our lives. Now the neshama, it's the highest level that we can reach in our body if we work and we correct the blemishes that we have made in previous incarnations. And this aspect only appears when man elevates himself or herself above this physical life. It's basically a more conscious way of living in this universe. We attain through this level an awareness of God, an awareness that everything is conscious, that everything is intelligent, that everything is good, that everything is made in order for me to advance spiritually. And what we're gonna see is that in some Kabbalistic writings it said that when a person dies, the nefesh stays around the grave and the ruach and neshama live. Some other Kabbalists might say, the nefesh and the ruach stay connected if there's a person that is a righteous person, but the neshama lives. The neshama continues living in the Garden of Eden in the spiritual realm. What we're gonna see is that as we studied using the resources, is that there are certain wordings in the Zohar specifically that are kind of confusing, because it says the nefesh and the ruach stick together. They're always together. But then it says the neshama and the ruach stick together. And what it's saying in the Zohar, which we're going to read, is that while we're living here, the nefesh is stuck to the guf, to the body. And the ruach, once there's a connection between the ruach and the nefesh, they stick together like lovers, They cling to each other. Now, if the person advances, then the neshama clings to the ruach. The neshama will not cling to the nefesh. It clings to the nefesh through the ruach, through this intermediary called the ruach, right? So of course the neshama is going to cling to the ruach. It's going to be connected to the ruach. So don't confuse that, that nefesh and ruach are together and neshama is apart, or that ruach and neshama are together and the nefesh is going to be apart. The nefesh is something that is going to be, in some cases, apart depending on the advancement of the person, as we're going to see. Now, there are other two levels, and that's the levels of Haya and Yehida. And these levels, we know about them from the Midrash Rabbah, Bereshit 14:11. And in there it mentions, that there are 5 levels of the soul. And when you read the Midrash Rabbah, you're going to see that the Haya and Yehida sometimes get exchanged. Sometimes it says Yehida and the highest one is Haya. And then you're going to find also it says Haya and then the highest one is Yehida. But we follow what the Kabbalists traditionally have passed down, which is that Haya is lower than Yehida. Now, Haya is the aspect of the soul in which we have this consciousness of the divine life force, right? Haya means basically like life. We hear talking in Judaism and also other traditions about eternal life. What is eternal life? Eternal life is this level of Haya, achieving this level of Haya, this connection to the divine life force. Now the Yehida, this is the highest level of the soul. And in here, the soul is in union with the Creator. It's a level in itself, but it's kind of like a level in which the soul nullifies itself. It's still a desire to receive, because the Creator is a desire to bestow. So the soul is an opposite to the Creator, right? It's still a desire to receive, but it's a different desire to receive. It's not as egoistic as the nefesh. In this level, there's a reciprocal relationship between the soul and the Creator. Now, there are other levels of the soul that we can achieve while we are here in our physical existence. And these levels, you're going to find them in some writings, but they have nothing to do with the 5 levels of the soul. They're just like additions that we get when we are in certain kind of process, spiritual process. One of the added soul that we can, if we can call it that way, is what we call the Ruach HaKodesh, Spirit of Holiness, or in other traditions they call it Holy Spirit. This is when the person achieves this level of clarity. It's considered that level that gives prophecy. And it was said that no one outside Israel can achieve this level of Ruach HaKodesh, but we're going to see that some Kabbalists in the past, if you studied about this concept, like Abraham Abulafia, he didn't agree with that. He said that anybody, anywhere in the world, not only in Israel, can achieve this level of Ruach HaKodesh. Okay? This prophecy state or clarity about life. Now, there's another one that is called an extra soul, a neshama yateira. This is basically a supplemental light that the person that is keeping the Shabbat receives. This extra light, this extra soul, helps the person enjoy that day. It's like the person receives a new garment for just that day. And it's like if you were receiving the garments that we were wearing when we were in the Garden of Eden, in Gan Eden. Now, there's another level called Neshama Kedosha, which is basically a holy soul, not to be confused with Ruach HaKodesh, which is a spirit of holiness. This is a holy soul, and it says that it's attained uh, by people as they age. They say that if a person is advanced spiritually, they can achieve this Neshama Kedosha at the age of 13 for boys and for girls at the age of 12. And it depends on how much the person has corrected himself or herself in previous life. So this is an introduction of what we call different souls, but we're gonna go now in depth on and see where we get this idea first of these 5 levels of the soul, and why is this important for us to know and understand who we are, what is the anatomy of our spiritual body, and how we can use it to achieve our own correction. While we study this, just remember, in Kabbalah we teach that the Gamar Tikkun, which is a correction, the final correction, is going to be achieved in a group setting, in a social setting, in a human setting, in which everybody is going to achieve that. But that does not mean that we as individuals, we cannot achieve that level of corrections on ourselves. We can attain spirituality individually, but as a whole, for Gamar HaTikkun to happen, for the Messiah also to appear, it has to be a group effort. Everybody has to be involved in it. So let's start with our study, and we're going to start by going to the book of Bereshit, Genesis. So in the book of Genesis, what we see is that we have a creation story or narration about how everything came to be. And if you have studied Kabbalah for a while, you know that this is basically the Genesis that we read in the Bible is basically chapter 2 of what happened before, right? This is after the breaking of the vessels. This is how the world of correction started, the correction process. And what we see is that in the first day, there was the vision of light and darkness. And then the second day, the sky, clouds, and the upper water and the lower waters were separated. On the third day, we see that there's an appearance of land, sea, and there's vegetation. And then the land start dividing the waters into what we call the oceans and the sea. On the fourth day, we see that the sun and the moons and stars are created, and and these are vessels basically that are going to hold that light that was created on the first day, right? On the fifth day, we see these sea creatures and birds and insects, and this is something that we're going to go in depth as well, together with the vegetation that appears on the third day. Then on the 6 days, we see more like the animal kingdom of like mammalians and amphibians, and the humans, which are created at the eve of Shabbat. Now, as we read this, we're gonna see that there's some keywords in here. But before we start this, I'm gonna share something with you that it puzzled me, when I was reading the book of Genesis, because it says on the first day there was light and darkness, and right, and then the second day, there were sky, clouds, and the climate were created. How this happened before the sun, the moon, and the star were created? If that happened on the fourth day, right? How can we have vegetation and the land and everything if the sun and the moon and the stars that will hold this light that was created on the first day were not yet created, And with time, understood that the Genesis story is not a scientific handbook. It is a narration of how consciousness started working in this environment that human beings are going to be living. And as we know, the vegetables, the plants, they are on a level that they can react only to the light, right? Other than that, there will be no movement. There will be like the mineral level. So the appearance of vegetation before the sun, moon, and stars is basically the Genesis telling us that, hey, we have something now conscious happening. We have consciousness on a lower level starting to evolve to a higher level. And this consciousness is called the vegetative level. And from there, this from this vegetative level, then consciousness is going to be able to distinguish between the light and the darkness that was created on the first day and measure its development through time and space. Now, on the fifth day, we see that the sea creatures were created and all that. And then on the 6 days, we see that the mammals, amphibians, and humans were created. But let's go to Genesis 1, verse 11. And it says, Then God said, Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yield seed, and the fruit tree that yield fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth. And it was so. And this is interesting because it says, Let the earth bring forth. All right? Then what we're going to see is that then the Creator creates the sun, the moon, and the stars. Now, for the sea creatures, it says the following. It says, Then God said, Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens. So God created the sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. This was on the fifth day. Now, what we're going to see is that then, this is on verse 24, it says, And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle, creeping thing, and beasts of the earth, each according to its kind, and it was so. What we need to keep in mind is that when it says, living creature, a living creature, it's what we call in Hebrew nefesh chaya. So we're gonna see, let the water abound an abundance of living creatures. So it talks about nefesh chaya. So this is the first mention of something called nefesh, right? Then let the air bring forth the nefesh chaya according to its kind. Okay. What's going to happen is that then what we're gonna see is on verse 26. Then God says, Let us make man in our image according to our likeness, right? So, so this is, in itself something different. Because now it just, instead of saying, God said, let the water, let the earth bring forth, now is the Creator Himself doing something coming out of Himself. And we mentioned about a way that the Baha Sulam in his introduction to the Zohar explained what is a soul. The soul is like this little rock that was basically chiseled out from a mountain. The rock has the same qualities of the mountain, but it's not the mountain itself, right? there was an instrument that broke it apart, and that instrument uh, is basically what we're gonna see, or ego. Um, so when he says, Vayomer Elohim naase Adam bet Selemenu kedmoten kedmoten. So let us make man in our image according to our likeness. So God created man in His own image, right? And He created not only Adam in His own image, Betzelamo, but also created man Sahar Venekeva, which means it was male and female. One soul, and it has male and female in it, right? And then what we're gonna see, the word Nefesh Chai is gonna appear again on verse 30, and which basically is giving man power over all these things that were created before. And what is this important? It is important because we need to understand that we have consciousness, which is stated by the creation of the vegetables. We have in us all the minerals, that's why we have bones. We have in us the water. We have in us basically all these things that were created, all these animals, all these things are in us. And that's why in Kabbalah we teach that the whole world, the whole universe is inside man. Uh, there's a saying that says, Adam Olam Katan, the man is a small universe, and Ha'olam Adam Gadol, and the world is a big man. So keep that in mind, because this is basically what is Kabbalah teaching us. Now, when it says in our likeness, Rashi explains very simple when it says, in our image, Betzelemenu, Rashi says in a simple way, with our mold. It was created with our mold. What mold? That's what Kabbalah says, it was created according to the structure of the Sefirot. And if man is created according to the structure of the Sefirot, then it's similar to the Creator. Not the same as the Creator, but it's like an imprint, right? Like an imprint, like this thing that presses into clay and leaves this imprint in the clay. That's exactly what we should think when it comes to the creation of us. We are opposite, but we resemble. Yet when we come together, it's like feeding, right? We feed each other. One gives, which is that seal that presses into the clay or the wax, and one receive, which is the wax. And what does this wax or clay receives? It receives the image of that seal that is pressing in it. So that's how we were created, and we were created according to the image of the Creator, which is the system of the Sefirot. Well, so far we've been talking about living creatures and man created in the image of the Creator. But how do we know what image is it that the Creator created us? If we go to the Torah should be telling us or hinting us to something. And for that, we need to go to the second chapter of Bereshit, second chapter of Genesis, in which we are going to see how the anatomy of man start changing. Not only does it change in man, which means the man was created male and female. Now there's a separation of these two opposites into different sexes and bodies apart, but also something happened. And he says, and the Lord formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostril the breath of life, and man became a living being. So what we need to look in here, when we go to the Hebrew, makes more sense. What we see is Vayaser Hashem Elohim et Adam afar, from the dust. min ha'adama, from the ground. Be'afech be'afayev nishmat Haim. What is this Nishmat Haim? Ve'chaye Adam ve'lenefesh Chaya. So what we're gonna see here is the following, so we can understand it. Let's dissect this. When he says the Lord formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostril, what we need to think is when the Creator was breathing into breathing into the nostrils of Adam, it was something that was coming from inside the Creator. That breath that is inside the Creator, imagine that is the breath that is inside your lungs, that is called the level of Yehida, okay, which is one with the Creator. One is blown out, that's the level of Ruach, when it's blown into the nostrils. And it says, that Nishmat Chaim, the breath of life. So now we see the Neshama, Nishmat Chaim. Ve'yehi Adam lenefesh Chaya. And then we see this level of nefesh in here. So we have these four levels: a level of Yehidah, which is the inner; the level of Yehidah, which is the inner; the level of Ruach, which is the blowing; and then we have the level of Neshama as well in here with the Nishmat Chaim, and the level of Nefesh, which Nefesh Chaya. And in this verse only, verse number 7, we have these 5 levels. And I think, to understand it better, it would be good for us to read from an explanation that was given by a Kabbalah rabbi. It was well known. His name was Rabbi Arizal, and he tried to explain this in a way that is a relationship between a glass blower and the vessel. And he reads, this is from the inner space, page 17 and 20, from Ari Kaplan. He says, the decision to make the glass emanating from the innermost will is the level of Yehidah. It corresponds to the universe of Adan Katmon and the apex of the Yod. Next we see the glass blower himself before he begins to blow out. This is the level of Chaya, living essence, corresponding to the universe of Atzilut, where the life force is still within the realm of the divine. This level parallels the Yod of the Tetragrammaton. Next, the breath, Neshama, emanates from the mouth of the glass blower and flows as a pressurized wind, Ruach, through the glass blowing pipe, expanding all directions and forming the crude vessel. The wind finally comes to rest, nefesh, in the complete vessel. So this is a better way to understand verse number 7 of what is happening to Adam at that moment with this glass blower symbolism from Ari Kaplan. When we read the Zohar is going to be talking mostly about the Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, and not necessarily about the Chaya and Yehidah. However, the Ari explains in his writing in Etz Chaim 42:3 that the Yod He and the Vav He correspond to the 5 levels of the soul, and the soul is like one unit one unit of what the Creator have actually created as a creature. And he also mentions that these 5 levels correspond to the different worlds, olamot, or universes. So we're gonna have the tip of the yod is gonna be Adam Kadmon, and the soul corresponding, or the light corresponding to it, is gonna be Yehidah. And this is a human will, manifest as our will, spiritual will, right? Then we have the yod, correspond to the Atzilut, the universe of Atzilut, the world of Atzilut, and that's a level of Chaya. And in our physical level, that corresponds to mind or consciousness. Then the He corresponds to the word Bria, that's the soul of Neshama, and that has to do with our thoughts. The Vav, it's correspond to the world of Yetzirah, and that's the Ruach, and has to do with speech. You know, when we talk, we're using air to create the sounds, right? The He is the word of Asiyah, that corresponds to the soul level of Nefesh, and it corresponds to the manifesting the human body as action. And we have to make sure we keep that in mind, because this is how it's going to appear in most of the Kabbalah writings, okay? Also, when we go deeper, there's also some other correspondences, as in the Guf, which is the body. The Yehidah is going to be the brains, the Chaya is going to be the bones, the Shama, the tendons, the Ruach correspond to the flesh or the muscles, and the Nefesh to the skin. When it comes to our head, and this is interesting because this is used in the Zohar as a symbolism, the Yehidah comes from the cranium, the Chaya from the eyes, the Shama from the ears, Ruach from the nose, and Nefesh from the mouth. And there's other correspondences in which it tells you, in which organ these different levels also reside, but that's, for more in depth than what we're covering here. Right now, what we're covering is why we need to know this, why we need to know that. So, our soul is divided into 5. The soul of Adam Kadmon, as we mentioned in the first video, was also divided into 5. So we're microcosm, Adam macrocosm. We know that Adam Harishon broke into pieces, and that there are 600,000 root souls that we belong to. So each of us belong to one of these 600,000 root souls. And that's something to keep in mind, because for us to achieve these different levels in Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, and to connect with them, it's hard work. It has to do with corrections. It's about correcting our desire to receive, correcting our egoism. And it also involves different reincarnations. It's gonna be different corrections according to when and how we will reincarnate. And for that, the Shar Hagilgulim, which is one of the writings of Arizal, he explains in there in depth how this process of reincarnation happens. If we go to Shar Hagilgulim, from the writings of the Arizal, on chapter 6, in there he mentions the divisions of Adam's soul. And he says that Adam Harishon was divided into 248 limbs, just as his body included 248 limbs, right? These are considered levels of the soul, or level of Adam's Harishon soul. And they're similar to the physical parts of a body, right? And there were other levels as well. But it says all the specific sparks of the soul of this world, all of them are from these levels from Adam Harishon, as mentioned. However, these specific sparks and levels mentioned were later drawn into human bodies and born from Adam Harishon. These specific sparks are called soul roots or root souls, since all of them were drawn from these levels of Adam Harishon, as we have mentioned. And in Hebrew, for that root souls is Shorshei Haneshamot. So if you hear Shorshei Haneshamot, we're talking about this root soul. Then he says, for each person to know the root of his soul, he must know and recognize into whom the specific sparks of the limbs and hairs of Adam Harishon distributed. These are called roots of the souls that came from him. It is likewise with respect to each limb in the manner elucidated by Chazal in the verse of Job 38 verse 4, where it says, where were you when I founded the earth? And then he says, that it was explained that most of the souls come from Cain and Hebel, the sons of Adam Harishon. And then in these souls, actually, these two souls branched from Adam Harishon. So in order to understand this, he says, imagine if you say that Hebel is the level of the head of all souls. Thus the soul of Hebel is the root of all the specific soul sparks of people who are from the level of the head. Likewise, Abraham Avinu, being the level of the right arm of Adam Harishon, as it says, all the specific sparks of souls of people from the level of the right arm of Adam are included in Abraham, because Abraham is their root. It is similar for the rest of the limbs and hairs of the soul of Adam Harishon. So he's telling us here that they're root souls, and that depending on the qualities of the soul, some souls are inclined to mercy, some souls are inclined to justice, some souls are inclined to different qualities, right? According to the Sefirot. According to that, that's the root soul that each of us may belong to. With this in mind, what we're going to see is that some people may belong to the head level of Adam Harishon, some people may belong to the right hand level of Adam Harishon, the left hand level of Adam Harishon, some may belong to the navel level of Adam Harishon, some to the right leg, left leg. These are different levels. Not everyone comes from the same root soul, but all of us have a collective soul. And this collective soul, which is the root soul of all these root soul, we know that is Adam Harishon. So that we can claim that we are all the same on that, at least on that sense of Adam Harishon, we are all the same. But when it comes to root souls, we are gonna be all different. We come from different root souls, different parts of the soul of Adam Harishon. And therefore, there's gonna be different kinds of corrections according to that part that we are born to correct. Because we cannot correct the whole soul, we can do our part. We came here with the root soul that comes from the right hand, represented by Abraham. If we work on that, if we do what we're supposed to, we're correcting that part of the soul of Adam Harishon, while other people are doing their job correcting other parts of the soul of Adam Harishon, and collectively, all of us are making the whole system whole again. Alright? But in order to correct that part that we are supposed to correct, right, we need to correct ourselves. We are talking about Adam Harishon as this collective soul, but what about the individual soul? This is where the Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama come into place. and they are basically the baggage that we have to, or we're born with one, right? One is given, the nefesh, but the other ones we have to earn it, attain it along the way by our corrections. Let's go to the Zohar, Zohar with the Sulam commentary, Parsha Lech Lecha, item 96, all the way to item 105. And we're gonna read this, and I want you to listen to it. We may not explain it because it explains itself. The Baal HaSulam commentary has in explanations of these verses. So let's start with 96 and understand that these items, item 96, all the way to item 105 in the Zohar with the Sulam commentary, these are very important because these passages connect us with these lights that are in ourselves. And remember, these lights have to manifest in an internal way. These lights, the Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, are basically or pinimi, internal lights. The Chaya and Yehidah, remember, they're surrounding lights. They're our potential. They're what we want to achieve. They're basically what we are, because we're that, right? We're already that, but we need to gain consciousness, attain it, in order to achieve that whole potential that is in those lights of Chaya and Yehidah. And when we're born, we get the Nefesh, and the Ruach and Neshama are in that state as well, as surrounding lights, as potential. So we need to achieve that potential. So you're going to hear that a lot from Kabbalists that apply this to everyday life. You need to achieve your potential. You need to achieve the potential. They're talking from a materialistic point of view, but in reality, it's true. There is a light that surrounds you, and you need to achieve that potential. So maybe you're stuck in life because you're just in that level of the animal, the nefesh, just seeking pleasure, but what you find is suffering. So how do you get out of that suffering? How do you get out of that level of the animal and rise yourself, to a higher level, the level of a human level, in which you can achieve and enjoy life? Is by connecting to the ruach. Is by connecting to that level of neshama, which is not only you living here and as an animal reacting to what the environment is giving you, you are thinking and you are conscious of what is happening and why it's happening. Okay, so this is a good thing to remember, that these levels also apply to our psychological well-being. So it says in the Zohar, the secrets of all secrets is passed on to those who are wise in their hearts. There are three levers that are attached to each other, and they are Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. Nefesh is the force from which the body is built. When a man is aroused in this world to mate with his wife, all parts of the body agree on this and are prepared to receive enjoyment from it. Then the Nefesh and the desire of the person indulge willingly in the act. That nefesh is drawn down and enters the sperm that comes forth. So basically, this is the force that animates that physical body. From the combination of that desire and the nefesh, another power drawn from the levels of the angels, who are called Ishim, people. They are entered as the sperm flows, and the body in them built and constructed in them. This is first and lowest power of the three levels. And because the nefesh offers a sacrifice by attaching itself to the foundation of the body, which is offered as a sacrifice to atone for the neshama, then part of it is offered to those grades are considered as ishim. Because part of the nefesh meaning the ruach of nefesh, is drawn down from them, as it is written, my offering and my bread for my fire, which means to the ishim. So because it is an offering that comes from the power of the nefesh, the ishim take their part as well. Their share is determined by the amount enclosed in the nefesh that offers the sacrifice. And when one leaves this world, the nefesh never leaves the grave. And because of the power of this nefesh that remain in the grave, the dead know and talk with each other. So, what we see here is he's telling us, that this nefesh is important. The nefesh is basically sacrificing itself by putting itself into this vessel, this cell, this body that suffers and seeks pleasure and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it tells us, that when this nefesh is corrected, it's also not only the lowest of all the three, but also it's a spiritual state. It's important, and it says that the nefesh remains in the grave uh, when a person leaves the world. And it talks here about something, that they know and talk with each other. So this is alluding, to kind of like people might use this as to talk about ghosts and things like that. But it's telling us, that this level is conscious. This level knows and understand, right? Ruach gives assistance to the nefesh in this world. It draws down the abundance of life and passes into nefesh. So remember, nefesh is mahut, the ruach is serampin. This is the middle level of the three. It is drawn by arousal of the nukhba of Atzilut towards the male of Atzilut. The nukhba is the mahut of Atzilut, and the male of Atzilut, it's the serampin of Atzilut, and they are in a state of united passion. Namely, during the act of mating, the female is aroused towards the male because of her passion to receive from him the light of Ruach. This means that it returns to the Nukva, which is called by the name Elohim, and even though the Ruach is drawn from Serampin, which is called Yod He Vav He, nevertheless, because it is the result of the arousal of the female, she is then considered to be the root cause of it. So after death and departure from the body, it returns to her. So the Ruach, when a person dies, returns to her. To who? To the Mahud of Atzilut. This Ruach, after a person's death, leaves this world and is separated from the Nefesh, which remains hovering over the grave, and it enters the Garden of Eden in this world. There it clothes itself with the air of the Garden of Eden, just as the supernal angels do when they come down to earth. Let's go to item 101. In the midst of the garden, there stands a pillar embroidered with many colors, and when the Ruach wishes to rise up to the world of Atzilut, it disrobes from that clothing, from the air of the Garden of Eden, enters to the pillar and ascends until it reaches the place from where it came, namely the Nukhba or Mahut of Atzilut. As it is written, the spirit Ruach shall return to the Elohim who gave it. And this is the 102. This is a very nice verse. I want you to, as you listen to this, meditate on it. And then Michael, the high priest, take the ruach and offers it as a sacrifice of sweet savor to the Holy One, blessed be He, namely Serampin. And it remains there in Serampin of Atzilut, and enjoys the delicacies of the bundle of life, which is described by the verse, "No eye has ever seen an Elohim beside you." Afterwards, it goes down from there and returns to the earthly Garden of Eden. There it enjoys the delicacies, clothes itself again with that same clothing, that is, with the air of the Garden of Eden, and dwells there crowned with a crown twice as big as the one that it had possessed before it rose up to the male and female of Atzilut. So basically what we're seeing here is that, so from the writings of the Ari, is that the soul descent does not mean the soul is lost. The soul descent means that the soul works, and by the merits of that work, it achieves these levels of Ruach and Neshama, right? And this means that the person, when the person achieves this level, or higher level, it's a better level, more correct level than the one that was before. Remember, this is all about correction. So we came down because something broke, and now we're going back because we're fixing something, right? Now the neshama, item 103, the neshama is a supernal power high above the other two, namely the nefesh and the ruach. It originates from the power of the male, which is the tree of life. That is seramping, called the tree of life. Draws it from Bina of Atzilut, and because he does so, he is considered to be its roots. This is just like the Ruach, which the Nukba draws from Seramping, and is thus considered the root. Indeed, the light of Seramping is called Ruach, and the light of Bina is called Neshama. The Neshama, after man's demise, ascends immediately. It does not come first to the earthly Garden of Eden, and does as does the Ruach. Rather, it ascends to its roots immediately, namely to Seramping, which is its roots with no regard to its drawing it. And these three levels, Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, are attached to one another. When they leave the body, they rise up and return to the place which they came, which is the roots. This is another secret here. When the Ruach leaves this world and enters the cave of Adam and the patriarchs, they give it a letter as a sign. Then he goes to the Garden of Eden. When he arrives there, he meets the cherubs and the flame of the revolving sword. If it is meritorious, then they see the letter, which is the sign, and open the gate for it to enter. If they do not see the letter, they reject it and do not allow it to enter. So this is basically what happens. The Ruach leaves this world, try to enter the Garden of Eden. If the person has done many corrections, it will be allowed to enter the Garden of Eden. If not, it's rejected and not allowed to enter. And it will dwell there for some time, sitting and clothing itself in the image of this world. And on the first day of the month and on Shabbat, when he wants to rise to the upper Garden of Eden, the righteous men who are in the Garden of Eden give it a letter as a sign, and it ascends through the same pillar, which is in the middle of the lower Garden of Eden, where it meets the watchmen of the walls of Jerusalem. If it is meritorious, they open the gate and it enters. If not, they take the letter away and throw it out. As it is written, the watchmen that go about the city found me. The keepers of the walls took away my veil from me. Shir Hashirim, chapter 5:7. The veil is the letter given as a sign, which has been taken away from it by the watchmen of the wall of Jerusalem. So this is Lech Lecha, where it talks about the three levels of the soul. Then we're going to find also in Lech Lecha, we find another section which is talk about the Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. This other section also connects us to this higher level of higher levels of our soul. So come and behold. This is item 152 of Lech Lecha. Come and behold my soul, Nefesh. This is the one that dominates at night and pursues its own grade, which is the Nukva of Seramping, as we mentioned before. Right? My spirit, Ruach, governs during the day. As it is written, with my soul, Nefesh, have I desired you in the night. This is the Nefesh that rules at night, because at that time it rises on high and is presented before the king. With my spirit, Ruach, within me, I will seek you early, refers to the Ruach which governs during the day. And if you say that Nefesh and Ruach are two different grades, separate from each other, it is not so. And this is where the confusion that I mentioned before happens, right? Nefesh and Ruach are together, or is it Ruach and Neshama? They are two combined as one grade. And there is a higher grade that governs them both. It cleaves to them as they do it, and it is called Neshama. All these grades rise in accordance to the secret of the inner wisdom, because when the grades look at each other, man is able to look upon the supernal wisdom, and then a neshama can enter them. To the nefesh and the ruach, and they cling to it. So when the neshama governs, then man is called holy, perfected in all ways, and is entirely devoted to the Holy One, blessed is He. So remember, the neshama is this expansion of consciousness. So of course, the person is going to feel this connection. The person is going to be holy. The person knows the laws of actions and consequences and all that, and it's going to have this sense of knowing the purpose of life. The nefesh, item 155, the nefesh rouses from below, which means that it is lowest of the lights, meaning the lights of nefesh, ruach, neshama, because it is closest to the body and nourishes. The body clings to it and neat to the body. Afterward, the nefesh is amended by the good deeds of the person performs, by corrections and tikkunim, right, the tikkun, and becomes a throne on which the ruach dwells. This is because of the awakening of the nefesh, which is stated to the body, as it is written, until the Spirit be poured upon us from high. After both the nefesh and the ruach are amended, they are ready to receive the neshama, because the ruach becomes a throne on which the neshama rests, and this neshama is high above all and remains concealed, attainable, and most hidden. Then in item 156 says, come and behold, the nefesh is the awakening factor from below. So the nefesh is what is looking for this connection. It calls for basically salvation, right? And we hear that word a lot in some traditions, salvation of your soul, right? It looks for this connection, it looks for this nourishment from these higher levels. Just like the light of a candle, in which the lowest light, which is black, clings to the wick and exists only through it, so when the black light is improved through and clings to the wick, it becomes a throne for the white light above it, because the white light rests upon the black light. This white light is equivalent to the light of Ruach. After they're fixed, the black light with the white light over it, the white light becomes a throne for the concealed light. What rests on the white light, which is neither seen nor known, is equivalent to the light of Neshama. The light is now complete in such a manner that the candle has three lights, one on the top of the other. First, a black light, which is the lowest of them all, and is attached to the wick of the candle. Second, the white light that rests on the black light. And finally, the hidden light that rests on the white light. And so a person who reaches perfection in everything also attains these three lights, one over the other, as it is explained by the light of the candle, which correspond to the nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Then that person is called holy, as it is written, for holy people who are on the earth, from Psalm 16:3. So here the Zohar is giving us an idea of how the connection between these lights happen, and this has to do with corrections. It has to do with this desire of correcting our nefesh, correcting our ways of using our body, or ways of using our basic desires, and also correcting our thoughts, and correcting our speech, our thoughts, and you're gonna see this, if you read Shir Salman's lessons in Tanya, you're gonna see this about the correction of thought, speech, and action, and it has to do with these three levels and how we can correct those things. And in this, which is just an introduction, I'm just giving you, the hints of what to look in your own personal research when it comes to Kabbalistic teachings and wisdom, and is to learn from Kabbalah what you need to do in order to correct your actions, what you need to do in order to correct your speech, what you need to do in order to correct your thoughts, what you need to do in order to expand your consciousness and have that connection with the Creator. And in that way, in an individual level, we can connect to these different levels of the soul, the nefesh, ruach, and neshama. We can achieve this individually. This connection, these corrections can be achieved individually. But as Kabbalah tells us, and probably if you read the Shahar Gilgul, it says that sometimes takes even up to 30 reincarnations in order to achieve that. But that doesn't have to be that way, right? If a person's desire is such that it wants the correction in one life and works really hard in one life in order to achieve that correction, it can be achieved. A person can achieve spirituality in one life, not necessarily needs to reincarnate. That's the reason we have every day we wake up in the morning. It's a new opportunity to do correction. There's a reason we say the Shema in the morning, the Shema at night, and there's a reason we do a prayer at night in which we are recalling all the things that we have done during the day, and we ask for forgiveness for these things. Okay? So make sure that you continue following us not only on Facebook but also here in the channel YouTube. We're going to continue with these kind of teachings. We're going to start doing basically like a series, following this with a series of teachings coming from a great Kabbalist called Rabbi Yaakov Abuhazeira, which have all the weekly Torah portions based on his writings. Very in-depth studies of the different codes and meanings hidden on each of the parshiot, but also with these videos, these two videos about what is a soul, is an introduction of what we're going to be talking in the future when it comes to more teachings based on Rabbi Yaakov Abuhazeira's, the Abir Yaakov as he was known and he's known. And in that way we can go more in depth of what Kabbalah teaches when it comes to correcting our actions or speech and our way of thinking. And this will help us also in our everyday life, because we know that there's loss of action and consequences, and we will then know that what kind of action we need to take and when to take these actions and all that. Okay, so I hope that this has actually helped you understand where all this idea of the soul comes from when it comes to Kabbalah. What does the Torah says about it? What is the meaning? Well, we have 5 levels, where it came from, right? From the Midrash and also from the Zohar, but also, from the Torah on that verse number 7 in the second chapter of Genesis. And also that there are sources out there that talk about this whole correction, like the Shahar Gilgul written by the Arizal. And there's another book that if you can put your hands on it, it will be also very helpful. It's called Anatomy of the Soul by Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, in which it goes more in depth into each of the parts of the human body and what kind of correction each part of our body goes through. But in reality, it uses the symbology of our body as a symbolism of the correction that goes through the whole soul of Adam Harishon. So this is all for now. I'll see you in the next lesson. Make sure you subscribe and like, and you continue sharing these videos so other people can benefit from it. Until next time, Shalom.